Hey guys, Dr. Snellgrove here, just recording a quick video about how to write body paragraphs for Essay 1 for our ENC1101 Composition 1 class. All right, and so this is deja vu all over again. I was talking about this kind of stuff in the intro writing video, but I've been teaching a long time. I'm a big believer that a lot of writing comes down to just knowing what the structure should look like, what the blueprint should look like. So there's a lot of folks that get nervous, like, oh, I don't know how to, um, what do you call it? Like, I don't know how to write an essay. I've never been a good writer. And, it's one of those things where, you shouldn't really think about it as a good writer, like some kind of innate quality. Like, I was born a good writer. I'm not born a good writer, but instead, like, okay, a good writer, one, has practiced a lot, obviously, but two, they know how to write different things. And there's lots of different ways to write lots of different things. But for our little academic essays, there are certain, blueprints for certain sections. And the body paragraph is no different. There's a basic blueprint for what you need to have. So I'm going to talk about the blueprint kind of generally, and then more specifically talk about each section, and also get into how this might apply to your own essay, your own first essay. All right. So there's only three real moving parts to any given body paragraph, right? It starts out with a topic sentence. So this is the first sentence. It is meant to be a supporting sentence, supporting the thesis in some way, right? We'll circle back to that if that sounds confusing. But then we have three or more supporting sentences, and these are meant to support the topic sentence in some way, back up what it's saying. Then finally, we have a concluding / transition sentence that does just that, wraps up whatever the current argument is and finds some way to kind of gracefully introduce us to the next, body paragraph. All right, so here is an example. Let's say, I think I gave this example before. Let's say that, I'm arguing for my essay 1, my controversial, stance thing here. Florida needs to legalize recreational marijuana. Something like that. Okay, if that is what I am arguing in this case, then that's my overall argument. So I have to come up with all these supporting arguments. You should always imagine you have an audience. They're kind of on the fence. They could go either way on this topic. So it's like, all right, I got to bust out these arguments to convince the people that are on the fence that I am correct. All right, so how am I going to do that if I want to argue that Florida should legalize recreational marijuana? Okay, well, one point I might make is that the state could tax it and make plenty of money that could then be invested in schools, much like our lottery income is. Okay, so I would have a topic sentence, very beginning of that paragraph. So it's my body paragraph. I would start it out with something like, the first reason Florida should legalize recreational marijuana is that the state could tax it and make plenty of money, or the state could tax it and better invest the money, that kind of thing, right? So it's a topic sentence. If it helps to think about it this way, it's like a miniature argument, right? You've got your big overall argument. Florida needs to legalize recreational marijuana. But then in this body paragraph, I'm going to be focusing only on, hey, Florida, should do this because it can make plenty of money. So that leads naturally, right, into our three or more supporting sentences. So the three or more supporting sentences, it's just that, like unpacking and explaining how this would work. So some of this I might explain the actual mechanics of how this would be sold through dispensaries approved of by the state. Each dispensary would have to pay taxes approved of by the state. So I can explain mechanically how that's going to work, but I can also get into the XYZ different things that the state could then invest the money in, because that's a big part of my supporting argument here, right? Is I guess maybe I should have said this earlier, but you're obviously not trying to appeal to people who love to get high. They already agree with you. You don't have to convince them. So instead, you got to convince the people that are on the fence. And it's like, how is this going to benefit you? And it's like, oh, hey, if the state is going to tax it, they're going to invest that in schools. Your children, for the reader, it'd be like, oh, your children, your grandchildren are going to have, better education because of this. Oh, that helps, hopefully win them over. Now, you can, if you're integrating research into this essay, then you can obviously get down to some specific cases like, hey, what does the taxation of marijuana look like over in Colorado, or any of these other states where it is legal, the sale is legalized. So you could do that. Speaking of research helping you out, I mentioned this a lot, but the most basic function of research is backing up what you are saying. So if you have been saying, or if you are arguing like Florida needs to legalize recreational marijuana as the main thesis, right? And then if the topic sentence is, the first reason Florida should do this is the state could tax it and make plenty of money. Okay, well, I could use research like exactly how much money did Colorado or whatever state bring in? Or I'm willing to bet you could find some research right now where it's like estimates of how much income Florida could make each year, how many millions of dollars if they did this. So that way, I'm not going to try to give you the hard sell, at least not right now. But that's one of those things of research. When I was in high school and when I was an undergrad student, a lot of times I would think about research as just a weird loophole the professor's making me jump through, or whatever the teacher's making me jump through. And it took me a while to realize, like, oh, wait, the research actually makes my writing easier. I mentioned that because, how to put this, like research for, just to clarify, here in our 8-week class, research is optional for essay 1. It's not a requirement. It's not a thing that you have to do, quote unquote. And so a lot of people probably heard that, like, don't do research, got it. But I'm a big believer, like, you could find a good source, the kind of stuff I'm talking about, like how much money did Colorado make from weed? You could find that in like 5 minutes, and then it might save you, 30 minutes when you're writing a paragraph. So you actually end up coming out ahead because it helps make your arguments stronger. It also helps make your paper longer. Like, I'm not going to encourage you to max this out arbitrarily, but for my classes, for my essays, up to 30% of your essay can be outside quotation. So that's a big break glass in case of emergency. If you're sitting there thinking like, how am I going to get 5 pages out of this? This guy is a monster. All right. So anyways, that's how it works on, you have the supporting argument, you express in your topic sentence. The first reason Florida should legalize recreational marijuana is, the state can tax it, make plenty of money. Then I have 3 or more sentences where I explain, analyze, and unpack that kind of stuff. Now, it's usually simple enough to do this. I don't want to jinx it, but it's usually simple enough to do this in an argumentative paper. But I did want to mention to you that there's something that I often torment my poor face-to-face students with. Is I call it the world's saddest infographic. I guess it's even sadder for you guys because I didn't even draw one out. So you can imagine it pretty easily, though, because here it is. You've got the thing you're arguing up here. Down here, you got literally everything else. And the idea is you need to constantly find ways to connect these to each other. So, if you throw out there just like a sentence by itself, last year, Colorado made, X millions of dollars by taxing weed. Okay, so what? I need to, for my reader, in order to win him over, I need to actually connect these ideas. Given how much money that Colorado was able to make through legalization, and given how much larger Florida's population is, it stands to reason the state of Florida could make that much more money by legalizing recreational marijuana. That kind of idea. So the world's saddest infographic is it's there for 2 reasons, basically 2 reasons. One, it's a gentle reminder for you as writers to always connect. Don't just assume your reader's going to figure it out. Always connect them back to that. This show, and I tell my face-to-face students, you don't have to use my boring boilerplate phrasing, but when you are, after you make a statement, after you bring in a quote, this shows that, this explains that. This helps us see why. That's all I'm doing. If you're familiar with the subreddit, Explain It Like I'm 5, I'm taking my reader by the hand and I'm explaining like they're 5 exactly, the significance of this. This is important. This shows that. This helps us see that. This explains why, blah, 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 blah. And then the other function of the world's saddest infographic, again, I don't want to jinx you, but this doesn't pop up usually as much in an argumentative paper, maybe in some of our other papers. But if you bring something up, or if you bring a quote in, or a personal story, or just whatever you bring in, and then you're looking at the screen like, oh God, I've got no way to connect this back to my topic sentence. It's like, well, in that case, you should probably just chuck it, because it feels weird to say this. Well, it feels probably even weirder for you to hear this. But even if you've just spent a little bit of time, researching and writing on this topic, you're basically, a subject matter expert compared to the average person. Why am I mentioning this? Well, if you can't figure out how the thing that you just said connects back to the argument you're making, the reader definitely can't. So if you can't figure out that connection, chuck that thing. All right. Finally, we end with the conclusion/transition sentence. So the concluding part's pretty easy. It's literally just wrapping up the argument that you were making, right? The harder part is transitioning to the next section. So I always tell the story. I'm gonna try to be quick about it, but I don't know if y'all had this experience. I heard when I was in middle school and high school, obviously I had teachers, say, oh, your writing's good. You don't end up an English professor if people aren't telling you weird stuff like that. But several of them did mention early on, like, oh, your essays need to flow a bit better. And I was sitting here like, flush it down the damn toilet. What do you want from me? And it took me longer than I'd like to admit to realize what they really meant was I needed transitions between paragraphs. As one paragraph wraps up, I need to have something there that's introducing us to the next one. So here is an example. Using our ongoing, if my overall argument is Florida needs to legalize recreational marijuana, and I'm in the body paragraph where I've been arguing Florida should do that because the state could tax it and make plenty of money, right? So then I need to wrap that up. Now, me as the writer, and hopefully I've got a good outline, as the writer, I know what I'm going to get into. My next section is going to be about how legalizing recreational marijuana makes medical marijuana research easier, right? So what will I do? I'm going to have a final sentence that's something along the lines of ultimately legalizing recreational marijuana could help the state save plenty of money, and it might just help Florida save plenty of lives as well. And then we rinse and repeat. My next body paragraph is going to start. The second reason Florida should legalize recreational marijuana is that it could help the state save lives by making medical marijuana research easier. So that's all I did. Save lives at the end of one paragraph ties into me saying save lives at the beginning of the next paragraph. That's literally it. But it looks to the reader like I had a game plan there. We smoothly transitioned out of the end of one paragraph into the beginning of another. And so if you don't have those kinds of transitions, now I'm on this side of the podium. I've told students many times, like, oh, this feels like you had three different arguments you just kind of stapled together. There was no transition between them, so it doesn't really look like you had a game plan going in, even if you did. That's the sad part. So that's about it. There was one other thing I was going to mention. I always mention this. I think I'm the only person that gets a kick out of this, and I'm really just tormenting my students. But one of the weird/fun facts about body paragraphs is they are literally miniature essays. So think about it, right? Because what goes in an overall essay? I'm talking like the whole essay. You got a minimum of 5 paragraphs, right? You have an intro, and that gives us the thesis, tells us what you're going to be arguing about. You have a conclusion at the end. Of course, it's at the end, wraps everything up. And then you have 3 supporting paragraphs in the middle, or more. I always encourage more, that support what you're arguing in the intro. All right, that's how you get a 5-paragraph essay. Again, I encourage more than 5 paragraphs, but why am I telling you this? Well, if you look at your body paragraphs, right? What are we doing with the body paragraphs here? It's like, well, there's a minimum of 5 sentences. You have you have a topic sentence that tells us what you're arguing about in that paragraph. You have a conclusion that wraps up the argument, and you have 3+ supporting sentences in the middle that backs up the topic sentence. So you look at a body paragraph, it's basically a miniature essay. Or if you look at an essay, it's, an outsized body paragraph. So I like that Zen sort of thing, man. The drop becomes the ocean becomes the drop. But you've probably got drops of anime sweat just waiting for this old man to finish talking to you about intros. So that is about it. If you have any questions, could be about the not about the intro. Sorry, I got intros on the brain. Graded them recently. Sorry. If you have any questions, it could be questions about the intro. If questions about the body paragraph, questions about the overall assignment, or pretty much anything else, feel free to email me. Feel free to text me at 863-835-2399. And y'all have a good one. Bye.